Thank you, Mario, for telling everyone on the stream that my name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Heartland Institute, and I will be conducting this panel here with a lot of your questions that are watching the stream today. We have viewers from all over the world. It's really amazing, and it's an honor to have you here with us today. And like I said, Liz, I'm very glad that you were able to sit down here because a lot of the questions are for you, or at least the first few coming along as they were coming in as you were doing your presentation, which was great. Well, here's a good question. This is from Douglas Pollock, who is a friend of ours from Chile. We know him very well. He watches often. He says, "Dear Ms. Truss, in your opinion, why has the UK never been able to see the dividends of Brexit until now?"
Well, fundamentally,
microphone down there, please. Yeah, could you?
Although we left the EU, we didn't get rid of any EU laws.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't get rid of the Natural Habitats Directive, the Working Time Directive, and some rules we've actually made more stringent than the EU. And this is because of two things. One is that we've had a group of politicians who were in favour of regulation, and that's been on both the Conservative and Labour sides. And net zero is a big part of that, but there are other regulations that those politicians like. But also, the British bureaucracy since the 70s has been very EU-facing. And they grew up, if you like, with the idea that one day they might make it to the European Commission, one day they might make it to the World Bank, and these are the people who staff the institutions in Britain. They staff the Treasury, they staff the Environment Department, they staff the Foreign Office. And whilst we left the European Union, we didn't dismantle the British bureaucracy. So we've still got the same tendencies. And these people are constantly pushing for closer alignment with the EU. They don't want to upset the EU. They don't want to take on the EU. So the way that we did Brexit was, in my view, we could have got a much better deal by pushing much harder and, being prepared to take the EU on, particularly on things like agriculture tariffs. And we didn't do that. We didn't take them on. And we ended up, with an okay deal, but we still got this massive problem with Northern Ireland. And the situation still doesn't work. So the answer is we need to sort out our own problems.
Okay. I have a question of my own, actually. As I jotted down during your presentation, I recalled how Keir Starmer was sitting with Trump in the Oval Office the other day, and he insisted that there is free speech in Britain. I don't believe him.
He literally...
And a lot of people in America don't believe him. Can you talk to that?
So there was a press conference last summer at Trump Turnberry in Scotland. And they were both asked on camera about free speech. And Keir Starmer said, we have free speech in Britain. There was literally a woman locked up in jail, Lucy Connolly, for posting on X while he was talking. I mean, the guy is a liar. There's no other way of putting it.
What can be done? What's going to be done about that? You can't have the kinds of reforms that are necessary. The having the popular expression of the people's will actually result in election victories and policy changes is not possible if people are arrested for speaking out against government policy, which now seems to be routine in Britain. Or am I overreading it?
You're not overreading it. We have had numerous people arrested for posting on social media, and journalists have been called at their homes. We had comedian Graham Linehan arrested at Heathrow Airport. So fundamentally at the behest, according to him, of trans activists. And this is what I'm saying about the infiltration of institutions. The police has been infiltrated. We've had this recent case where the West Midlands Chief Constable was found to be fabricating evidence at the behest of local Islamists. That is, and the chief executive of the local mosque was on the selection panel for him to get the job. So the situation is bad, and I think unfortunately for some time, Britain has led the world in bureaucracy, and we've exported our bureaucracy to various other countries. And we've seen the bureaucracy has become increasingly independent or unaccountable of elected politicians. And as I said, it was under Blair that huge powers were given from Parliament to the bureaucracy and the judiciary as well. And yes, this can be fixed by getting rid of all of those laws and replacing a lot of the people. But that is a huge task. It's a huge task.
Invite everyone on the panel to weigh in on this free speech in Britain, or lack of free speech if you want to, or if not, we can move on to another question. All right. Go ahead, please.
I never get Andrew Britain.
Yeah, I'm a bit afraid. I mean, I'm a dual citizen, but can they still ban me if I'm a citizen?
You just be jailed.
Yeah, you won't be convincing.
Current citizen, you get if you're a British citizen.
Okay, that's not very good.
You won't be banned. You won't be banned. They're going to come get you and put you.
I'm not sure I should say anything, but I want to agree on this. I think there's and again, no offense, but I mean, for example, Boris Johnson did have a huge majority. So if anybody could have changed some of the terrible things Tony Blair and Gordon Brown was doing, that was Boris Johnson. So it's really what is going on in the UK as a citizen. It's terrible to see. I never would have imagined the UK could go so low. As I said, as a Hungarian, I never would have thought Hungary would be far freer than the UK, and it is. And I'm just surprised. I'm also surprised that more and more people are not protesting and going on the streets, because you can do this because people are not. I mean, you couldn't arrest tens of thousands of people. So if more and more people would be, I mean, I'm just surprised. Why isn't there bigger protests about this? I mean, perhaps people don't know or are so afraid. It's just very strange. But I really thought that kind of the two nations which are the most brave and bold and freedom-loving are America and the UK. And I'm just really surprised. I never would have thought that these kind of things can happen. But I also think that there is sadly the British governments have been very weak on this as well, especially Johnson, because I think he had almost an unprecedented majority, which and popular support, which he could have turned into significant reforms, which he should have done. I'm sorry to say this, because the current system is just inherently anti-British. I mean, it's having basically a Supreme Court. I mean, that's terrible. It's not the English way at all.
Do you want to respond to that anyway?
I can. As I said before, I've written about this in my book, 10 Years to Save the West, which goes in a blow-by-blow account of what happened. I mean, the whole British. So 2010, when I was first elected, the original sin of the Cameroons and the Notting Hill Conservatives, which included people like Danny Finkelstein, Michael Gove, George Osborne, etc., is they said, we want to be the heirs to Blair. And they didn't. And, I was, as I said earlier, much more of a supply sider than they were. However, I didn't, in 2010, understand exactly how bad this stuff was, because it was a slow burn. So things like the Supreme Court, which was established in 2005, I just thought, well, this is the law lords in a different building, which it kind of was. And when I became, in one of my many jobs that I held in government, Lord Chancellor in 2016 after Brexit, I discovered that I did not have the powers that the job used to have, and that the judiciary were actually being appointed by a self-appointed quango of judges. So I think, one, people took a long time to realise, and this was the cleverness of Blair, is that he said he was acting like a Mrs., he wasn't really changing the policies of Mrs. Thatcher, but he did all this stuff that was very subterranean, like establishing the Climate Change Committee. When it was established in 2008, it didn't have, because the targets were so long away, nobody thought anything it wasn't thought to be that big an issue. When they put in the Equality Act, which imposed DEI in law, people were like, well, equality is a good thing. So all these acts were called innocuous stuff like human rights. Who could possibly be against human rights? There's another act, the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act 2010, where they put the Civil Service Code into law, which essentially makes it much harder for ministers to countermand civil servants. But again, all this stuff was it was incremental. It was lots of different things. So that's point one about. And so by the time, we went through a lot of psychodrama, but which I won't. I mean, we could go into Brexit with Theresa May, all that stuff. Very long psychodrama. But essentially, when Boris got into power in 2019, the people around him didn't want to change the system. And he was surrounded by people, and this was partly the Conservative Parliamentary Party, and there was a problem for a long time with candidate selection. Right-wing people were deliberately rooted out. And you can read all about this in various books, but they deliberately selected, centrists. There's a polite way of saying what they are. If you look at, they deliberately selected centrists. And this is kind of the people who, and I've talked about the camera, these people who wanted to modernize the party, they wanted to have more women, more ethnic minorities. That was the focus. They want anybody who wanted to bring back hanging, sort of this sort of stuff. So you had all these MPs who, and then a whole load of them got elected in 2019. A lot of them weren't expecting to win. So what they wanted is more money for their constituencies. They didn't want somebody to spend 5 years unraveling the Blairite legacy. And I remember, and I won't say which Boris Johnson special advisor this was, but you can read my book. But for example, I wanted to abolish the Equality Act because I became Equalities Minister. And one of the things I'm proud that I did is I stopped gender self-ID in Britain, because that had been, Theresa May had started that in motion and I stopped it. I mean, I had to do all kinds of kowtowing to all kinds of people, but I did stop that. And I said, we've got to abolish the Equality Act. I wasn't in Parliament when the thing had been passed. I not really looked at it closely, but I looked at this thing and it's like, there are these protected characteristics, it's just awful lefty stuff. And I said, no, everybody should be treated equally under the law in Britain. This Equality Act is terrible. We need to redefine equality to be fairness of treatment, not equality of outcome, blah, blah, blah. And one of the Boris advisors says, no, it's too controversial. We can't do it. So it wasn't, and actually Boris personally was a bit more forward-leaning on that stuff, but he was surrounded by this infrastructure in the Conservative Party who didn't want to do it. And by the way, there are issues I don't agree with Boris on, so net zero being a prime example, and China being another prime example. But on the equality stuff, he was relatively good. All I'm saying is that the whole party was, taken over. And there were people in the party fighting that, and I'm a primary example of that. I was the one that got through. But I discovered the same thing, that the entire party infrastructure didn't want to do what I wanted to do when I was in number 10.
Well, I mean, that points to a point, or maybe some other people on the panel, because can all answer this question. It's something again that occurred to me listening to these wonderful presentations was that, how is it that policies that are so unpopular just will not change? I mean, in the United States, we elected Donald Trump, and to be honest, in my opinion, if he would have done 40% of what he's actually done through all of his executive powers and the influence that he has, I would have been doing backflips. And now that he's done way more than that, and it's only been 1 year. And so I have lived my entire life at the age of 55, living in a society in America where there are policies that are not popular. They do not have popular support. They're certainly not things most conservatives would endorse. The years of Ronald Reagan, frankly, alone would be an exception to that. But then Trump is elected, and suddenly the will of the people is being reflected. The border is going to be shut down. He's imposing tariffs. He wants to get rid of the income tax. We're having policy discussions in the United States today that I wouldn't have dreamed of years ago. And that's because Donald Trump is actually making some policy changes that, he's leading the way. And hopefully it'll go faster when you get legislators actually passing laws to make these things more permanent. So the idea that the United States under Donald Trump is the freest, most exciting place to be if you love freedom, and every country in Europe, again, it's like, how is it that things that are that unpopular never get changed? And there seems to be no hope for change.
I can answer that question. So the key point about Donald Trump is he was president in 2016. So he was thwarted. He had people leaking. He had conservatives in name only in his administration. He learned from that. And he made sure that everybody he appointed is ultra loyal. I think that is so important. It's one thing I say to people. Intelligence is overrated and loyalty is underrated. There's a lot of, somebody said to me, apropos of he's very intelligent. I'm like, yeah. There's quite a lot of people like Michael Gove's very intelligent, but it doesn't mean that's a good thing. It's an issue when you have people who are intelligent, but they want to do the wrong thing. And what our bureaucracies are full of, and this will be true in the United States, it's true in continental Europe, it's true in the European Union, is you've got very clever people who have bad ideas. And what the left have worked out is these policies aren't very popular. It's not very popular to say, don't have more kids, don't drive a car, don't get any richer, allow blokes in the women's changing rooms. These policies are not popular. So rather than deliberately trying to get elected and saying, we want to allow men in women's changing rooms, instead, Stonewall get their people in the police, or they get their people in the government, or they get people to sign up to the Stonewall Charter. That's how the left have been operating and organizing for the last 30 or 40 years.
I'd like to add something about you hit on something that's very, very important. All these super intelligent people are graduates of some of our elite institutions on both sides of the Atlantic. And as long as we don't stop that train, meaning turn our backs on the elite legacy institutions, the Ivy League, for example, and promote the creation of new educational institutions, they're going to still be producing these graduates that go on to jobs at the IMF and then go on to jobs in the deep state of Washington or London or wherever. And being a pessimist by nature, I don't see that changing very easily or very soon, but it is something that we try to encourage on various projects. Stop there.
Okay, sure. Actually, we have a question in the room here.
Thank you.
Can you come up to the microphone and speak into it, please?
Thank you. We are talking about threats to freedom in Europe. We've just received a message that 2 Farmers Solidarity members have been just arrested during protests in Strasbourg against the Mercosur deal, which we will talk about tomorrow. I was wondering if we might express our solidarity with them. And of course, it's a brutal reminder that what we are talking about is a daring reality, and it's really happening as we are sitting here. So thank you so much. That's not a good news, but I simply felt that I should share it with you.
Thank you. We do stand in solidarity. All right, it might be easier just to keep it out of there and pass it along. That stand is a little weird. I guess I just got a note from the people behind the scenes here producing this the stream today. Apparently, Trump, this is from Alan Jessen, actually, one of our viewers. Trump just agreed to meet with NATO and European leaders on Greenland. What do Europeans think? And will the elites cave and make a deal?
Well, I'll start with that one. First of all, Europeans don't think as a monolith, and even people who consider themselves to be European patriots or conservatives don't think in one block. So just as, of course, Trump says America first, each European country should think of its own country first. And so I think, for example, Denmark feels differently about Greenland than, for example, Hungary might. And so I think no one would say it's a bad idea to have a conversation. And to be frank, I think all of this grandstanding about sovereignty is a bit laughable, given how hypocritical it is. So I'll be interested to see if Trump's tactic, which, I mean, I don't know why people get surprised every time President Trump does exactly the same thing. And I was talking with Linnea yesterday, one of the wonderful speakers from yesterday. People keep on getting surprised when President Trump asks for something outrageous and the terms are outrageous, and everyone goes in a panic and starts worrying about democracy all over again. And then a deal is reached. Everyone pretty much leaves okay with the deal, like any deal maker. And then 2 months later, they've forgotten about it. So others, I'm sure, have something much more profound to say. But my feeling is that if people are surprised by President Trump's approach to deal making, it's not like he's hidden who he is and how he operates ever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me get to another question here, as we have the time for it. This is a good one. This is actually a topic that the Heartland Institute has researched and covered quite a bit over the last few years. Question is, how do we fight the implementation of central bank digital currency in Europe? And is it a tool that can be used for control, as so many warn about?
Yeah. So I am an arch critic of central banks. And one of the many Tony Blair laws I didn't mention is the 1998 Bank of England Act, which essentially made the Bank of England unaccountable. It made the governor unsackable. And it was my battle against the Bank of England that ultimately enabled my detractors to bring me down. So, I've been face to face with these people. They are an international cabal. I think Trump is right with what he's doing with the Federal Reserve. I think they are a problem. And they are the largest source of unaccountable power. And a lot of these policies we're talking about, they stand behind, essentially. Yes, central bank digital currencies are a big problem, but I would go further and say their current structure is a problem. There's a fashion. Again, a lot of bad stuff seemed to start in the 1990s. Apart from the Cold War ending and Eastern Europe being freed, I think that gave us a huge. But I think it gave the West a huge sense of complacency, and we had all this bad stuff starting. And one of it was the trend of central bank independence. And I'm very interested in this year. I've been talking to a lot of people who were involved at the time, who were in the Treasury or the bank. They would say, I said, why did you do this? I said, the British system worked perfectly well. Mrs. Thatcher and her chancellors had control of monetary and fiscal policy. They were able to transform the British economy, get the country back on its feet. And then you had this process, which actually started with the Maastricht Treaty, which had central banks embedded in it. And then essentially what happened is the Bank of England was announced independent. And since then, we've had a series of disasters. Quantitative easing, I think, has caused huge problems. The response to the financial crash caused huge problems. The printing of money during COVID was really the cause of a lot of the problems I was trying to deal with when I was in number 10. And they said, oh, well, it was kind of fashionable at the time. Everybody else was doing it. We looked at the Bundesbank. We thought it was quite good. I was like, is this a reason to junk, a institution that was actually relatively accountable for hundreds of years? It was like, oh, it was fashionable. And it's the same with the Supreme Court. It's like, well, the Americans and Europeans have these Supreme Courts. Let's just junk 1,000 years of the British Constitution to put this Supreme Court in place. And it's these things have been a disaster for Britain, and I think they answer the question about why Britain has moved away from its ancient liberties.
Someone should fix that. That would be great. All right. Actually, this is going to be a question for Istvan. This also had me. I had the same question came into my head. So you said that Hungary is fined how much? €1 million a day?
Euros.
For what?
For basically not following EU laws on migration.
Okay.
There's two things. One is, as I said, because we don't allow asylum seekers to actually ask for asylum at the borders of Hungary. And the second thing is we said no to this relocation plan that they would like to. I'm not sure what is the actual number. I think 40,000 migrants they would like to put into Hungary. And we said, we want to protect our own borders and want to choose who we want to live with.
Okay. So $1 million a day.
Yes.
What happens if you don't pay?
Well, that's actually a really good question. I'm not an expert on EU law, but sadly, the real problem here is that we're actually not getting EU funds now properly. So you have the cohesion funds, which Hungary is actually paying into, and we should receive as all European countries. And because of corruption and rule of law issues, we are not getting those monies. They started this before the 2022 elections. They did the same with Poland, with the previous government. Miraculously, as the new government was elected, they had no rule of law issues anymore, and they sent the money. And the even bigger problem is we actually have a COVID recovery fund, which Hungary was very much against because it's a common loan. And we said we are not happy about having a common loan of all European countries, even if it's for COVID recovery, because we're just, we're uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
They still pushed it through, and we are paying the interest rates, but we never got a cent of it. And then, of course, they wanted to do the same for Ukraine, and we said no, because again, we didn't like the idea that you will have this common loan, which we already tried and was not very good for us. So,
are you guys really in the EU? I mean, I started to have my doubts.
But look, I mean, and honestly, I have to tell you this, and I might not be popular, but the original idea of European countries having free trade, working together, I think it's pretty good. So, I'm for a long time, I was pretty pro-European in a sense like that. But sadly, it has been captured by people who are trying to push this agenda, and it's turning back to the elite problem we have. So sadly, now we have people in the elites of most of the European countries who either really believe in this, so they really think that we're going to this nice progressive world where everybody's going to be equal, even if it's going to be a Brave New World kind of a system, because I think that's the only system where everybody can be truly equal. I mean, I don't like this word at all. Or are just very afraid, like the gravy train in Brussels, the golfing partners are more important than what the people think, and just don't speak out against these things. So they just go, a lot of our, kind of conservative friends in the kind of mainstream, all the European conservative parties are like this, rhinos, or just, people who are weak or unwilling to kind of push what they should be doing or representing their own people. It's really sad to say Hungary is luckily not like that. And I think the current government in the Czech Republic is not going to be like that. And hopefully we'll have more and more countries who will follow suit. And that's also something which you don't really talk about. Still, member states in the end have most of the power. So if you would have a very different government in, let's say, Germany and France, you would see a very different European Union potentially.
Did you still want to weigh in on that?
I did want to weigh in. First of all, I think what's been done in Hungary, what Orban has done, is a very good example of taking on the bureaucratic state. And again, you've got somebody like Trump with the experience of doing it, being out of power, coming up with a plan and taking them on day one. And that's really important. I think it's very hard to do when you're in the machine. And I think people who haven't been in government don't understand just what is a combination of feeling like you're in a prison and a sort of drowning at the same time. Maybe it's like being waterboarded. I don't know, but it is like that. Honestly, it's like you can't really describe just what it's like being in the system and having that experience, being out of it, and then taking them on. It's what Orban did. It's what Trump did. So I think everyone needs to learn from what Orban did in his second period in office.
Yeah.
The second point I wanted to make is about the EU. And I think it is basically the leverage the EU have is access to the markets. And basically, Hungary would be in serious trouble if they shut off access to the single market. And as you say, the only two countries that can really take that on is Germany and France. They're the only countries with enough leverage to take it on. And my view is the EU just has to be dismantled. You can never have a supranational organization that works. None of them work. The UN doesn't work. The World Trade Organization doesn't work. The World Health Organization doesn't work. They just don't work, because the minute you have unaccountable power, and I'm back to my point about the central bankers, people just misuse it every single time.
Well, when you get back home, tell Orban to not pay $1 million a day. And I want to see, because I'm curious, I want to see what happens.
Yeah, but they will they will literally close the borders. Do you remember? Was it France and Germany had a cheese war, and they wouldn't let us block the borders. That's what they'll do.
Okay. Well, all right. So we're close to the end of time here, and so Mario, you said that you are pessimistic by nature.
Yes.
I'm going to
Called Dr. Doom by some of my friends.
You have.
If any of you remember the Marvel Comics character.
Oh yeah. Well, let me see if I can top you on that. So, one of the things that came up in at least the last two presentations in a wonderful afternoon here in Zurich at the World Prosperity Forum, basically summed up by saying demography is destiny. And Istvan, you were talking about how Hungary is, I think, third in, maybe second or third in Europe in right? Third?
Yeah.
Right. Grok says second, so I'll let you have that promotion. I asked them. But regardless, the Hungary is in the top 3, Slovenia is in the top 10, Czechia is in there, as you had mentioned. In fact, everybody in the top 10 is an Eastern European country.
I think France is in the top 10 as well.
Not according to Grok. I don't think Grok I don't think Elon likes France, but just so fine. But it's dominated. Let's say
European statistics, they might be skewed. I don't know.
Right. Well, my point being that it's dominated by Eastern European countries and has been for a while. And Hungary obviously has instituted very aggressive policies to promote family creation and as large families as possible. This is well known and much discussed here in the United States. The bad news is that your replacement rate, it's not replacement rate. 2.1 is considered bare minimum replacement population rate. I believe Hungary was 1.8, and it's around there, but it's not even yet 2. So to black pill, even my friend Mario here, and you talked about it, Ellen, about how there's nothing inherently wrong or racist about European self-identity and pride and wanting to have a country called Hungary for Hungarians, and et cetera, across, and Britain for Britons, or however you may want to define that. But the fact is that European countries are not replacing themselves. This generation hasn't replaced itself. My generation, Generation X, hasn't done it. The younger you get, the fewer kids are going to have. I don't mean to be completely pessimistic, but does any of this really matter? Hungary is not going to be, there's not going to be Hungarians in Hungary anymore in 100 years or 200 years. But there's not going to be enough. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so unless you really address and fix, lack of a better term, that replacement level birth rate in each of these countries, what's going to happen?
Let's go right down the line. I think all of us want to opine on this. I think we should be talking about replacement, but it should be in terms of the great replacement, an idea that has been well documented and incredibly is now being discussed from the vice president's office to the halls of power here in Europe, in some places, in those places that have not forbidden the topic. The great replacement is the idea of a Frenchman who talked and highlighted the very things you brought up, Jim, that native-born populations are not having enough children, well below the 2.1 replacement rate, and that we are importing all sorts of people who have nothing in common with the values, the traditions, the vision of Europeans, and the same can be said of the United States as well. We at the European Conservative have been opening spaces in which we can discuss this idea more and more. And there's a lot of people who are now emboldened to talk about it and to talk about what does the future look like. Unfortunately, back to my own opinion, it is pretty pessimistic. I don't see us turning it around. It's like turning around the Titanic. It's going to take generations and generations. And despite my admiration for the Hungarian program to promote families, it's insufficient. I don't know what else is required, but I think, and I've been telling people, we should be prepared, and especially industries and companies, for declining consumers and populations, because that's a significant impact. We're already seeing this. Wall Street Journal recently had some reports on how certain businesses are beginning to worry because their clients that they had calculated would continue to grow are suddenly disappearing. Why? Well, because they're dying off. It's the baby boom generation, and there's no one else to replace them as consumers or clients. So I'm very concerned about the future. I'll pass it on to you. Help me feel better about the future.
I mean, I'm going to be kind of un-Hungarian because Hungarians are usually pretty pessimistic, but I'm not that pessimistic. So first thing on the Hungarian policies, it's fairly new. So they have been in place and, they have been extending them constantly for a bit more than 10 years. So I don't think these things will give, kind of immediate measures in a couple of years. It's a long game. So you have to be committed. And, I'm not sure what another government will do, but these policies have been pretty popular with the population as well. So I'm very much hopeful that even if you will have different governments, they wouldn't really dare to touch some of the main elements. Going back to the problem, we have a problem. And it's a very big problem because of several reasons. One is, we live in now cultures, not luckily in Hungary, but in most of Western Europe and partly America, where basically, you should be ashamed of your own culture. So if you're a French person or a British person, you should be ashamed because of slavery, because of colonialism, God knows what. So, children are growing up in school and everywhere, but they should be ashamed of their own culture. Why would you replicate that culture then? It's an even bigger problem because the media is full of it. Movies. I'm a millennial. When I was growing up, you had proper families in TVs. So if you watched a movie or something, you had heterosexual couples having kids. Now, if I watch movies, you hardly have that. It's always single parents, divorced parents. Even if you have them, it's two. Either the husband is some joke, a fool, like basically an oversized baby, or it's some. But really, that's the case. But it's some kind of like a fool in the family, or even worse, it's some aggressive, especially if they are white, and they have to be aggressive, abusive, alcoholic, something like that. But even that is rare. So most of the films or TV shows would not even have these kind of families as well. So you have this culture there, and I wouldn't go into some of the extreme forms of feminism that actually may say you shouldn't have kids because of climate, but also because, you're better off. You can't, progress in your career. You cannot have and that's partly for males as well, but I think it's even more damaging for women as well. And I see that even in Hungary with some of the friends of my wife as well, actually. And the other thing is economic problems, which goes to the crazy climate change thing sometimes as well, is, what do young people have to look forward to? So I said they should be ashamed of their culture, of a lot of things, and also they don't really have the opportunity to get home ownership. They cannot buy houses. They might not be even able to own a car because they will have to buy electric cars or something. And we also have elites, and Germany, for example, is shooting in itself in the foot. So what can you look forward to if you're a young person in Germany? What is your economic future? It's pretty bleak. Why would you have kids? So you have these, economic problems which are very serious. You would have to turn them around. Cultural problems which you have to turn around. And if you deal with these things, but that's a really big job, and you would have to have very brave people reading the countries to change them to have any chance of succeeding. But I think there are good chances. Trump was elected. As I said, we have Orban, we have Babiš now in the Czech Republic. The polls are very promising for all of the other populist parties in Europe. So I'm very hopeful that this can be changed. I'm much more hopeful today than I was, let's say, a year ago, especially with Trump being elected. So it's going to be a tough thing, but it's not impossible. And I think there is a shift, especially with young males in the West, where people are becoming more and more conservative. So I'm a pretty conservative person myself. And let's say 10 years ago, if I talked to people, I felt that I'm kind of on the very how should I say, conservative spectrum. But now I talk to some of these young people, and it's like, oh God, I mean, this person might be more conservative than I am. So I think there are kind of positive shifts, and let's see. But I'm more hopeful actually than I'm pessimistic, at least today.
Oh, great. Go ahead.
I suppose I'll just add that I think the problem is more cultural than political. And we've seen the secularization and, let's say, cultural capture of the left, at least since, 1968. And I don't know if many people were the frog sitting in the slowly heating water, not looking around at the number of children people were having and just saying, well, 2 is pretty much the same as 3, or 3 is pretty much the same as 2. And, okay, so there are more only children, but that's okay. And not really noticing what was happening. And I do think that culturally, the recapture, let's say, the counter-revolution, the cultural counter-revolution is going to take some time, but I do think that national pride and putting religion back into our culture, the European traditions of the Judeo-Christian West, I think could turn things around. So I'll have to go home with Dr. Doom and fight it out. But I guess I'll be Susie Sunshine and he can be Dr. Doom.
Well, I think it is possible to change the trajectory, but it needs a massive shift. And I think, like, if you speak to, I've got 2 daughters, if you speak to young people in Britain, I think most people want to have a family. It is what people aspire to. They want to have a family. They want to have a good job. They want to live in a nice house. They want to go on holiday. It's what people aspire to. And they also are very proud of their country. But the problem is we've got this elite who are in control, who are not necessarily of that view. But I do think the Hungarian policies of tax breaks, cheap housing, these are the things that make the difference. It's just so, and this is yet another thing central banks have completely done, is through QE, through printing money, have created an asset price boom that has essentially priced lots of young people off housing. And the biggest issue in Britain for families is getting on the housing ladder. And you can just see as you go 10 years younger, people are in smaller and smaller houses and they can't afford to move out of home. It's lots of 20-somethings work in London now live with their parents. That wasn't the case a generation ago. And I think if you really want to shift it, you have to do Hungary plus. You have to do the Hungary policies, but more so, you have to make it incredibly economically advantageous to have a family. You have to, if you said to people, right, if you have 4 kids, you're going to have a great job, a house in London, a great lifestyle, people just sign up for it tomorrow. It's not difficult. That's what they want. It's so, I can't really exaggerate how impossible it feels for people. Really feels impossible. And people that do it have done it because they've been able to earn extraordinary amounts of money because of their parents, whatever else. And we've created this. And I think the same trend you see in the United States as well.
Yeah, that's we're going to leave it there. Let's have a round of applause in the room here for our wonderful panel. I mean, we had former president of Czech Republic, Václav Klaus. We had Dr. Doom, Alvino Marino, Mario Farini, and Sue Storm over there is also Ellen Farini, and Liz Truss, and of course Istvan Kiss. So thank you very much. What a fantastic, unbelievable round of speakers that we had today. We're going to be back tomorrow, same time, same channel, 3 p.m. Central European Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Time in the United States. We hope to see you there. Thanks for your support and watching. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it's all empowered.